You could call it Zen face.
Zen face. All right. Well, welcome back to another episode of TWiP Weddings. Once again, my name is Bruce Clark, and I am joined, as always, by my usual co-hosts, Mr. Brian Capricci and Mr. Robert Evans. Good day, gentlemen.
Good day.
Good day, good day. Happy New Year.
Yes, Happy New Year. So we're recording this as our first show of the new year, so we survived the holidays. Well, it's, of course, now that we're through the holiday season, we're kind of into bridal show season, and so this week we thought it would be a good chance to share our thoughts about participating in bridal shows. Are they worth doing? And if you're thinking of participating in a bridal show, we'll share some strategies and some things to think about to sort of get the most out of exhibiting your work at a bridal show. But before we get into that discussion, we want to remind you how you can participate in the show. We've got a bunch of different ways to interact with us. First off, you can visit the website at thisweekinphoto.com/weddings. There you're going to find the show notes for each episode. We put links in there to everything that we talk about. And there's also a video, so if you want to see our smiling faces, there's video on there. We had somebody comment on our Facebook group a little while ago that they couldn't find the videos. So if you're looking for the videos, we embed them into each blog post for each episode, so you can watch us there if you feel like seeing our smiling faces.
Which you definitely do, I think.
Which absolutely,
yeah, sure.
But Robert particularly.
At least for 2 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, if you have a question or if you'd like to suggest a possible topic for a future episode, you can email us. Our email address is twipwed@thisweekinphoto.com. Or if you prefer using social media, just add the hashtag TWIPWed to your post, and we'll keep an eye out for your post. Hey, did you guys see that Twitter might be allowing for up to 10,000 characters in a tweet?
No.
Yeah, they might be changing Twitter to allow up to 10,000 characters, but they'll only display the first 140 kind of and then you have to dig into it to read the rest of it.
Oh, I thought that was just for direct messages.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I didn't read all about it, but I heard that might be a change that's coming to Twitter. So
interesting. One of the things I read about was Twitter is trying to make changes, and actually Facebook is doing the same thing to allow companies to do better customer service through those social networks.
Oh,
because right now, if you were to do a direct message in Twitter, it's just 140 characters, and you can't really do much in that.
Yeah.
So I heard that was sort of the reason. And Facebook has a whole new manage inbox functionality too.
Oh, yeah, cool. Yeah, they're probably getting some complaints because the way that it was working was horrible.
Yeah.
I basically turned on auto replies on Facebook and said, please contact us here.
Right.
So, awesome. So, yeah, so that's one way you can get a hold of us. Another way, of course, if you want to keep up with us and follow us, probably the best place is to go to our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/TWIPWed. And there's lots of people joining every week and lots of good discussions happening in there. People are asking questions and helping each other out. So definitely the Facebook group's probably the place to be if you want to get involved.
It's buzzing in there.
It's buzzing. So, all right. Well, let's jump into the show. And like I said at the start of the show, this week we're going to talk about bridal shows. And of course, bridal shows continue to be a popular event where brides and a few reluctant grooms, I think, go to see the latest wedding trends. They go to view the latest wedding fashions, see what kind of free swag they can get. And potentially shop for their wedding vendors. So in this week's show, we're going to share our experiences with bridal shows and provide our thoughts on how to benefit from participating in them. So I want to kick it off by asking both of you guys: Have you ever, or do you regularly participate in bridal shows in your respective areas?
Robert, I'll let you take this one first.
I have ever, yes, okay. I have ever, but it's been ever and ever and ever ago since I've done one.
Before the internet.
Before the internet, definitely before the internet. I did one, I think the last bridal show that I did was the year I opened my business in January of '94. And at that time, the show that I did was billed as, it was like a high-end bridal show. There were some big anchor hotels like the Ritz-Carlton and the Four Seasons and things like that. And it was at the convention center in Los Angeles, and I did it all by myself. And I have to say, by the end of that day, I was more tired and exhausted than shooting an entire wedding for 12 hours.
Wow. How long were you there? How long were you manning the booth and getting it all set up?
I think it was probably 8 hours. I mean, by the time you set up, 8 hours. I think the thing that was exhausting, I mean, of course, we stand on our feet all day as a wedding photographer, but I think it's the mental of sort of repeating yourself and saying kind of the same stuff over and over and over again. and being on and smiling and talking to people and all that. I mean, for some reason, it was just completely exhausting by the end of that day. But I mean, I do have to say, from that particular show, I probably booked, let's just say 8 weddings. I don't quite remember. But over a 3-year period, what really blew me away was that, 2 years later, I get someone like, yeah, I saw you at a bridal show. And it was the only show that I did. So I was really surprised that, like, even 2 years later, I was still pulling leads from it, or somebody, did that.
Yeah, interesting. Brian, how about you? Have you do you regularly, or have you participated in bridal shows, or have you regularly done them, or?
So I don't. I've done them. I do them. But I guess I would not say them. I would say one. There's actually just one show that I do every year. And kind of the same thing. It's not necessarily a high-end show. I mean, I guess it sort of is, because there's this group of hotels here in the Niagara region, of venues, of really high-end sort of boutique venues, and they do a wedding show every year, and they just bring their clients and people getting married at their venues. So it's a really highly qualified wedding show, and that's the only one that I do. So I don't necessarily do the sort of the big venue show, the airport hotel kind of show. But yeah, I mean, I do that one once a year, and that alone, is good for me, along with word of mouth and referrals and my own marketing that I do to get me, through the year every year. I run kind of a higher priced, lower volume business. Mm-hmm. So for me, 20 to 25 weddings a year is a perfect amount, and I can fill that up every year without doing too many bridal shows.
Yeah, nice. I have never done a bridal show before. I've photographed one before, so I was hired to actually go in and photograph a bridal show, but I haven't participated in one as a vendor yet at this stage. So I wanted to ask you guys, in terms of your thoughts, who do you think a bridal show, in terms of the photographer side of things, who do you think is best served by bridal shows? Do you think that established photographers will see much benefit, or is it just more cost and time than it's worth, or do you think it's more for kind of photographers that are just kind of getting into the market and want to establish themselves and get their name out there?
Well, I think you could be established. I think it's more of a price point, in my opinion and my experience. I think most brides, there's always exceptions, but most brides or couples are, at a bridal show, I would guess, they're looking to spend maybe $2,000 to $5,000 at the most. Mm-hmm. That's my experience and just stories and talking to people. And generally, you're not going to get a super high-end bride or couple come to a bridal show. There are exceptions, but I think that referral is going to come more from a planner, word of mouth, things like that.
Yeah, Brian, what's your experience? What do you think?
I think for the most part, like if you're doing the sort of mass wedding shows, you're probably going to be getting definitely more of the tire kicker type crowd. Not to say that you can't do really well at those shows. I think the problem with shows like that is, and this is I guess a bigger problem even in any traditional marketing platforms, because if you look at something like magazine advertising, wedding shows are the same thing. Everyone is there showing off the best of the best, and usually they're doing it through photographs, right? Like even if you're a venue at a wedding show, well, you can't showcase your venue in other way than just to show either an album of the venue or photos of the venue or anything like that, a banner, a pop-up stand, whatever.
Right.
So like there's an overwhelming amount of beautiful imagery. I mean, a venue is not going to come with a bad image of their venue, so it's going to be a beautiful image. Maybe
so it's very visual.
So yeah, it's very visual, right? So it's like we are not lost in a sea of beautiful imagery, but certainly when you go to those mass shows, it's very visually stimulating for the brides and grooms that are walking through it.
Yeah.
So it makes it that much more difficult because there's so much more noise. Not to say that you still can't do a good job at it, but I think a lot of the times photographers go to wedding shows sort of looking at them a bit of the wrong way, in the sense that oftentimes when I've talked with photographers and photographers even that I mentor, they'll say they want to go to shows so that they can talk to the brides and talk to the grooms, right? And obviously that is a huge benefit, but something that maybe you don't consider is the marketing you can do to the brides and grooms before the show, the marketing you can do to those same brides and grooms after the show, but then also all the intrinsic benefits that you can get out of networking at the show. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do. I think a successful wedding show would be 30% conversations that you have with brides and grooms the day of the show, 30% marketing before and after the show, and then 40% just networking and building relationships with the other vendors that will then either be able to point brides and grooms in your direction at the show, or that will refer you after the show to build lasting relationships.
Right. So that's a good sort of jumping off point, because I want to ask both of you guys. So for those maybe who haven't done a bridal show before, what do they typically receive? So you mentioned about doing some marketing and stuff like that to the potential brides and grooms before. Robert, what was your experience when you did a bridal show? Did you get a list? I guess this was probably pre-internet days, right? So did you get like a phone list? Like phone numbers and things?
They would give you all the names of everyone that attended. And phone number, address, whatever information that couple gave, and then you could do typically snail mail marketing or calling if you wanted, and do it that way. The best is I think when you're at one of those shows, you can tell the people that are a little bit more interested, or the people that you're interested in, based on venue and conversation and that type of thing. And so then I would make an extra effort to actually ask for them to get their own contact information from me, and they would say, would it be okay if I followed up with you? Like Brian mentioned, this isn't the greatest place to talk and have but I really want to sit down and spend some time with you, make them feel a little bit important, and that obviously you want their business, but without being too pushy. And most of the time they would be like, yeah, and then the ones that didn't, you knew that, okay, well, I was getting the wrong signal or reading. And I also liked what Brian said. I was going to bring that up too, is it's a great place to network. You can, there's always even times during the show where, like at the end of the day, there's like a lull, or things are, gotten a little slower. And sometimes they're 2 days long, sometimes they're 1 day long, but you can walk around and introduce yourself, just say hi, hand out a piece of material, even get their contact, say, hey, I really love your flowers, would you be interested in working marketing together, doing a styled shoot, whatever it is, to get, offer something and say, can I, follow up with you? Can I get a card? And it's again, we've talked about this before, but business is about relationships. So to be able to get face-to-face with so many people in one room is a big plus.
Yeah. Brian, what's your experience been in doing them? What have you gotten a lot of information? Because I always thought that you would get that sort of the lead lists and that kind of stuff kind of after the event. You were saying, ability to do it beforehand. Is that, I guess it depends on the bridal show and what they offer?
No, I mean, I think the sort of standard is that you get the list afterwards.
Yeah.
But I think what I mean when I say marketing beforehand is if you're strategic in what you're doing with your marketing, you can certainly reach some of those brides and grooms ahead of time, and you can also reach some of the vendors ahead of time. So, like, I guess if we break it down and looking at what you can do before, during, and after, if you're looking at what you can do before, I'll use the wedding show that I do just as an example, where it's at a hotel or a chain of hotels, or not a chain, but I guess a group of hotels. If I do, just as an example, I could do Facebook ads targeting people that like those pages of those venues, who are brides who are getting married, who are in a certain demographic, and then target ads towards them, telling them who I am, and maybe even saying in that I'm going to be at the wedding show. There's a good chance that people who are engaged, who like those pages, who are in more demographic targeting, will be at that wedding show. So even if I'm hitting, even if 50% of the people that I'm hitting with those ads are going to the bridal show, those that do see that ad will be like, oh, I've seen that somewhere. Where did I see that before? I've seen him somewhere. Or maybe when they see it on Facebook or Google AdWords or however you want to do it, they click on and they like your page and they start to see your work. And then at the show, they're like, oh, yeah, I've been following you on Facebook for a while. It was so great to finally meet you. So there's a lot of things that you can do like that ahead of time.
Okay.
If you're
So pre-plant the seeds.
yeah,
Right?
like kind of pre-plant that.
Yeah.
But then also with that, like on the vendor side of things, we know exactly who's going to be at the shows months in advance. So why wouldn't we go and reach out to all of those vendors that either we know or that we want to know and say, hey, we're going to be at this show together. I'd love to come by your booth and create some images of your booth that I'd love to share with you afterwards. Is that okay with you? I can't wait to meet you. And then you can then go and meet them, and again, you've had more of a warm introduction when you do see them at the show, as opposed to just having to walk over and say, that's a nice bouquet type of thing. So it just kind of, again, it's brand recognition, it's starting that relationship. It makes it so that when you have that offline relationship, it's not completely cold. So you're starting on some sort of like solid ground. So I guess that's what I mean when I say like marketing ahead of time, is you can do a lot to kind of prepare for the show. Something else I've done in the past is leading up to a wedding show, I'll do a series of blog posts where I'll share images that are related to the vendors that I know that are going to be at that show. So I'll say, hey, here's like, a whole bunch of images from this florist, or here's some ideas for floral trends featuring these florals from the last year. And then I'll tag those florists in it, and I'll email it over to them and say, hey, if you want, feel free to share this. It's something you can share with your brides and grooms and blah, blah, blah. And then they'll go and share it. So again, any people that follow them that will be at the show are now, they have some level of experience in seeing me, even if it's just to see my logo somewhere.
Right.
There's different things like that you can do that can make the show itself much more effective if you're strategic ahead of time.
Makes sense. Okay. So let's. I want to go. I want to circle back and talk about kind of follow up and after the show and things that you can do after the show. But I want to get into the show itself and get your guys' thoughts and suggestions on kind of the booth itself and kind of what went into the booth and elaborate a little bit more on that. So Robert, when you did your wedding show, did you? How did the booth come together? Did you design it yourself? Did you work with like a planner or somebody to help kind of put the booth together? And what did you have in your booth?
Back then, no. I did it myself, just like a lot of small businesses. I had to do it. I think I might have had some flowers on my table from a local florist that I talked to. Yeah, I'll bring a bouquet over. They stick a card in it. But it was primarily several different albums, and then wall portraits, larger wall portraits on easels.
Okay.
I didn't have if you go to like WPPI or a trade show, I didn't have a backdrop or a, booth that I kind of set up or, something that comes in. I didn't have any of that. I had a sign, they give you a little cheap sign that says the name of your business. I think I had something else, like maybe a wooden sign or something that I hung. But that was it at the time. You don't get a ton of time for setup. I think you can come in an hour or two before. Sometimes the day before. Like I've heard people go in the day before if it's right. But yeah, if you want to put a little more effort into your booth, again, I think it would give you a little bit more attention. I would say overall, from what I've seen, and even some of the ones that I've gone to as of the recent, I've attended a few of them just to walk around.
Yeah.
And photographers, I think, don't go too crazy, but it is about sort of how they display their images. And, some of them get a little creative. So I think it's to each his own. It allows, your artistic side to come through, and, you want to attract people to come to your booth.
Yeah. Brian, what have you done with your booths? Do you kind of design it yourself, or you work with the because I know sometimes the bridal fairs will offer up companies that can kind of help you with that and do that if you need some help bringing stuff in. What's your experience been, and what have you seen out there and just in attending bridal shows?
I think it has to do with even what I talked about earlier of the idea of standing out, right? I mean, a lot of the other vendors, like if you look at a decorator, for example, or maybe even a venue or a florist, they're going to show up with like the beautiful drapery and like all these, like they're going to set up a mock table or have some linens, and they're going to do these things that make it look like it could be at a wedding reception or it could be a backdrop, or things like that. And you could do things like that. I did that one year where I actually hired one of the decorators to kind of set me up this really beautiful thing, and she kind of draped some piping and all that kind of thing. So I mean, that's one thing that I've done in the past. But what I've done for the past 3 years is I actually built a booth. And I sent you a link to a video, Bruce. If you want to include it in the show notes, you can. Just it shows the building of it. But basically, what I did is I had reserved a corner booth at the trade show, at the bridal show, and I basically built 2 walls. I built a corner wall, so I actually had like this little kind of space that I could then hang the images on. I could have a couple tables around, and it was not just the same old drapery that everybody else was using.
Right, because it's usually just a series of poles and some.
Right, yeah. I mean, if you go with like bare minimum, the venue is going to set up poles with like a black backdrop or a white backdrop, and then it's up to you to do something else with that.
Yeah.
A lot of vendors will just go with that, but that doesn't really necessarily distinguish you from anybody. It doesn't really give you any brand recognition. It doesn't really make you stand out, right? So if you want to be different, my suggestion would be that if you're going to do a wedding show, you've got to be looking at spending a few $1,000s on all these things that you're going to be doing, including the booth, including marketing material, including things that you're giving out, anything like that. And a booth is a big part of that. So, I mean, I've seen photographers go as far as like setting up like little quasi living rooms. They'd have like doors and little vintage couches and suitcases and little cute lamps and stuff. And I think that's really neat, and it's really trendy. It's attractive to the brides and grooms that are coming there. But something that I had a bride say to me a couple years ago that really stood out in my mind, and I've always kind of held this since then, is she said that at this wedding show there was a bunch of photographers that did that cute, cool little vintagey thing.
Right. Yeah.
And she said when she walked up to their booth, she actually had to ask them, what kind of vendor are you? Like, are you a rental company? Are you a decorator? Because the photographers that do that typically won't put like big prints up, or they won't make it a big emphasis that they're a photographer, because they're all about these cute little styling things.
Right, right.
So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you're going to do that cool little trendy thing, whatever it is, vintage is sort of now / the past couple of years, whatever's coming up next, don't forget that you're a photographer, so show off what you do so there's no ambiguity there. So that would, I guess, just be my suggestion. But I think really ultimately I've seen some really, really unique things. I've seen vendors build a single wall where they'll have a TV in the wall, and that way you can kind of walk by it from both sides, so it'll be like a 2-sided wall with 2 TVs in it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really cool. I've seen photographers set up, some like studio lights and just kind of like make it look more photographer-ish. Mm-hmm. I think there's lots of things you could do. If you go on Pinterest and just search like wedding show, my gosh, like you probably won't find yourself pulling away from that for a couple of hours, because there's a lot of stuff on there. So I would suggest that just to kind of get some ideas. But really, you have to think about, what is your brand? What are you all about? What do you care about? What do you want brides to see of you? What do you want them to remember you by? And then how can you be different than what everybody else is doing?
Right, because you want them to kind of stop in and hopefully pay attention to your booth amongst the sea of other booths.
Yes.
One of the complaints that I've heard, just at the local wedding shows here, and one of the reasons I've been reluctant to do them, is that a lot of the wedding shows typically say that they'll put a cap on the number of a particular type of vendor. So let's say photographer. They'll say, okay, in this wedding show we're only going to allow X number of photographers into the show. But when push comes to shove and they get to the point where they need to start selling their booths to get the place filled up and to pay for it, they kind of loosen those rules a little bit and open the floodgates. And I know that one show a friend of mine participated in, she was told there was only going to be, I think, 10 or 15 photographers, and there ended up being like 25 photographers at this show. And so she wasn't too happy, and she actually got placed next to another photographer. So they put 2 photographers actually side by side at the show, and she was not too happy about that. So Robert, what have you seen around that, or can you speak to that, your experience with that?
Well, I was actually going to bring up a point that I've actually saw I noticed it at a trade show recently, somebody advertising a wedding show, is that the wedding show people are starting to step up their game a little bit, in that it's not just a ballroom with a mishmash of a bunch of vendors in it. The one that I saw in particular, they were actually looked a little more high-end, a little more modern, but what they were actually doing, what you just said, is they were lumping and putting all the vendors together. So all the photographers were in one section, the wedding planners were in a section, the florists were in a section, to make it a little bit more conducive for the bride and groom. They could go to different sections and see. And I actually kind of liked that. Again, you mentioned the photographer you knew was upset because they were by another photographer. I think photographers, what we have to remember is, we're all different. We all have our own style. We all have our own personalities, and that's what you're selling when you're there. So I kind of like that idea of like, that's different and unusual. Like, hey, put all the vendors together, because people that are in the photography section are looking for a photographer, more than not, as opposed to if you're just kind of spread out. And sometimes when you're spread out through a show and you get that back booth that not everybody goes down that aisle, you might not get seen as much, but maybe there is a bigger photographer in your area that people want to come see, but it does attract people over to your area. I mean, that's given that the bridal show is doing it that way. But I noticed that recently, and I thought that was kind of new and different, and I like the idea.
Interesting. Yeah, Brian, have you seen that at bridal shows, or have you seen the more traditional where they try to like spread everybody out and sort of give some space between similar types of vendors?
Yeah, I've seen it be more spread out. I think that's really interesting that you kind of segment them like that, which is really cool. But I think in having them spread out, I also have heard photographers complain where it's like, oh, well, there was a photographer across the aisle from me, or there was one 2 booths down, and it's like, what else upsets me is that when I Google Niagara wedding photographer, there's other photographers that show up there. Gosh, I just wish that Google would just show my name.
This is the only one on Google.
What else upsets me? When I put an ad in a magazine, that there's other photographers that are also advertising in the magazine. Like, can you believe the nerve?
The gall.
Like, come on. Like, let's give our heads a shake a little bit and say that, like, this is marketing. Hello, of course the bridal show is going to have other photographers there, and if they're by you, suck it up, buttercup. That's the way that it goes. And if you are doing a good enough job in distinguishing who you are and what you do and what kind of photographer you are, then you should be worrying about that. And brides that will book another photographer may not necessarily book you. And if they're booking another photographer when they should have booked you, then you didn't do a good enough job building a relationship with them and communicating the value that you uniquely bring to the table that would convince them to book you instead. So I think a lot of the times photographers look to blame external forces that are beyond their control for things. But really, if we really look at things, I think that we need to start taking ownership over that kind of stuff.
Yeah, good
and I think if you want to be going back to one of the points Brian was talking about, or maybe it was you, Bruce, but business savvy, you do a show and they say, well, we're only going to have 5 photographers, whatever that number is, 10 photographers. We guarantee that. Okay, great. Change their contract to say for every photographer that you add over 10, then I get $100 off my booth or $500 off my booth. That will hold them accountable. Say, I'm happy to be in your show, because they're in business too. And I think it was Bruce said, they've got to fill those spots. They make money for every person that's in there. And the other thing, if photographers really want to dig into it, if there were only supposed to be 10 and there ended up being 20, go walk around and ask everybody what they paid for their booth, because towards the end they start wheeling and dealing, and you might have paid $1,000 for your little 8x10 booth if somebody else paid $500 because they want to fill spots.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
I think something else, just if I can quickly interject around that idea. I remember a couple of years ago I was speaking with one of the local business owners in my town, and she had a little retail shop on the main street in town. And she had said she had just opened up like a year prior to that, and she said, oh yeah, I think I'm going to be closing down the shop because I thought that opening up a retail spot, here in town on the main street would be enough in and of itself to bring people to me and that my business would increase.
If you build it, they will come?
And I said, yeah, that doesn't really work. Like, just because you hang a shingle up doesn't mean that all of a sudden the people are going to start coming. You've got to do something. You've got to market yourself. You've got to be strategic about your business growth. And I think the same thing is true here. I think just because you have a booth, just because you're physically there at the show, means nothing. It means nothing. It means that, yes, you might have brides that will walk by your booth, But if you think that is enough to book you brides or to increase your business, then I think you need to start looking at what you're doing there instead and be a bit more strategic. And that's how we said, marketing before, marketing afterwards. What are you doing at the show? How are you attracting people? How are you getting them to remember you? Because here's the thing: if you've got a show with 200 vendors there, and there could be a lot more than that, there could be fewer than that. That's so overwhelming for a bride and groom. I mean, they're going to have their little bag, their little mesh bag that they get from the show or whatever they're putting things in, and they're going to get something from everyone that tries to shove marketing material down their throat, and they're going to go home and they're going to sit down on their couch and say, holy cow, now what, right? They're going to dump everything out on the table, and they're going to start to kind of cull. And if you haven't done anything to make them remember you or to give them something that can stand out from the sea of business cards and brochures, then again, being at the show was worth nothing for you.
Yeah, and we've probably all experienced that one way or another, whether it's not a bridal show, but even just a trade show within our own industry, or if you've worked in other fields and other businesses. I know I've been to a bunch of different IT trade shows and things like that. Yeah, it's the same thing. You come home with that giant bag full of stuff, and 99% of it ends up going in the trash. So both of you guys, I want to ask, what are some ways to help you stand out a little bit, to help you, draw those brides and grooms in and be memorable and be somebody that when you follow up with them, they're going to remember talking to you? What have you found are some effective strategies or some suggestions? Like, I've seen things like door prizes. I've seen little, handing out little mini albums. Like, just what have you guys seen or suggestions for kind of standing out a little bit?
I think, well, I wanted to just quickly reiterate something that Brian mentioned, just so that I put a little exclamation point on it. But as far as a marketing tip to other vendors at the show, Brian mentioned, taking photos of their booth, before the show starts. That's always a good plus, and everyone loves, they want to use it for their own marketing. So if you could actually get that photo taken and quickly get it emailed to them, which is a great excuse to get their email addresses so they could, instantaneously do it, I think that's a great plus. I don't know. That's a real tough question as far as, what you can do. I mean, I think you need to have a little personality. It needs to obviously represent you and your brand. And I think the other thing that we haven't talked to, Brian sort of again mentioned it, but these shows are expensive. I mean, not only is it $1,000 plus generally just for a space, but then you have to print up marketing materials for the show and, giveaways or books or all the things that you're doing. So it definitely can get expensive. But, I think I would need a little more thought on that. But I think the thing is like you guys brought up a very good point, and and I've done this too. You go home with the bag of stuff and you dump it out, and you look through it and you're excited, and then maybe it sits in the corner and it sits there long enough that you're like, and you end up pitching it all. So it's whatever you do, it needs to be some sort of standout. Used to be the DVD, and I don't think even then the jump drive of images or things and.
Or the floppy disk.
Brian just showed a picture for those of you who are of a floppy disk. Wow. So whatever you do, it really needs to jump out. So you need to be creative, in what you give them. Because I think the days of, I think the closest thing in today's world is the jump drive with the branding and the, that is a little, not too expensive and, a little techy, and so that might be okay. But I think even that, we need to go even beyond that and think of something like, wow, what can I, maybe you give them all an 11 by 14 image or big thick cardboard. It's the biggest thing in their bag with images on it. I personally think less is more. So maybe it's just one powerful image with your name and website and phone number, done.
Yeah. Brian, what have you seen out there? What are any thoughts on what you can have in the booth itself to attract people in and make sure they kind of remember you?
I think that we need to be proactive at wedding shows in the sense that we can't just expect to have a conversation with a bride and then hope that they get in touch with us. And I think that's where a lot of the times photographers will say, oh, well, that show didn't work for me because I didn't have very many inquiries afterwards. Well, it's because you left it up to them, and again, they got home and were overwhelmed, and didn't know what to do from there. So I think that if we take things into our own hands and we do things like get their email address so that we can follow up, or get their phone number so we can follow up, then I think that's really effective. I think that the tactic of doing like the ballots, or hey, enter your name for a prize, it's like, okay, great, like you and every other person here at the show, like I think that has lost its personal touch. And I think that, you know, a lot of the times, you know, consumers today see past those kinds of methods. I remember even a couple years ago, I had a bride that booked me after one of the wedding shows, and she said that she had gotten an email saying that she won a free engagement session, and her best friend, who was also at the show, who also filled in the thing, also got that free engagement session. So I was like, ooh, you all won. It's like, okay, obviously everyone.
She's like, I didn't even enter.
Right? Yeah. So it's like, I think you have to be careful, because I think those can be really kitschy and really kind of overdone, and you're not going to get the results you want out of something like that. But what I advocate for is only get that personal contact for those that you're actually communicating with, having a good conversation with, and that you've started the relationship with, so that when you do follow up with them, they're not wondering, why is this random guy that I just like picked up a brochure from his site, why is he following up with me personally? So make it a point to have real meaningful conversations with brides, dig deeper, get to know them, let them get to know you, and if you connect with them and if you're feeling like a mutual connection back from them, then say, hey, listen, I'd love to keep talking with us about you, but obviously it's a little bit busy. You got to get onto your thing. I don't want to steal you for the whole show. Do you mind if I grab your phone number and I'll follow up, and love to have you over to our studio to talk about your wedding some more? There'd be no reason that a bride wouldn't want to do that if they felt the same way about you that you'd feel about them.
Right.
So I think we can be doing things like that. That's obviously it's going to be more laser marketing than it is kind of shotgun marketing. So you're getting maybe 40 email addresses or phone numbers as opposed to getting 400 email addresses and phone numbers.
Quality over quantity.
Qualified, right? Yeah, exactly. The other thing that I think we can consider is look at what, like, where are we today in how we communicate as society? Like when you have a bride and groom that's at a wedding show, what do they have on them that you can kind of tap into, that you can use as a means of marketing, as a pull-through, as a lead magnet? Well, what does everybody have in their pockets usually? Their smartphone, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, obviously we can do giveaways and we can do things physically like what Robert's talking about with a book or with a print or with whatever. I showed the floppy disk, and I'm happy to talk about it in a little bit if you guys want to, but I actually give away a floppy disk.
Okay.
It's an icebreaker for me, so I can talk about why I do that. But and my pick of the week is actually something else that I'll talk about at the end.
Okay.
Which is related.
A floppy disk?
It's not floppy disk. No, it's a book, actually. It's like a big, it's a physical, that's what I gave away. But
Nice.
If everyone has their smartphone on them, why couldn't we do something like, hey, obviously you're at this venue, and so you're interested in wedding photos at this venue if you want to see all the hot spots in the area. I've created a little gallery for you that you can actually make as an app on your phone that you can download. Would you want to see that? And of course the bride and groom would say, well, yeah, I'd love to get some inspiration. It's kind of like my own customized Pinterest thing. Right, so then use sticky albums, make a little album, and put it behind an email page. So they right there on the spot say, hey, go to bcapphoto.com/show. Right here, right in front of me. Type in your email address, and as soon as you do that, it's going to download this app to your phone, and then you can see some images that you can show your family and friends. If maybe your mom isn't with you and she wants to see what this room looks like, I've got a photo of the room in that app right there. So that's a great way, and that's just one quick idea off the top of my head. I haven't actually done that myself, but that's just how thinking creatively about what we're doing, about how we can utilize what people already have on them and with them in a way that is beneficial and helpful for them. If it's something like, hey, would you like to join my newsletter? What's your email address? They're going to be like, well, what's in it for me, right? So I think if we can think about what's in it for them, and then how can we give them something that is going to be of high value, there'd be no reason that they'd want to connect with you.
Yeah, well, technology, that's a good point, and how much technology has really changed all of this, all the landscape, right? Like, Robert, back when you did your first kind of bridal show, it didn't exist, right? So probably a lot of brides and grooms that were coming in had never, they didn't really have a great way of researching about their potential wedding vendors, right? Apart from maybe flipping through the yellow pages. The wedding show was kind of the place for them to go around and see. Now a lot of brides and grooms can probably do a lot of their research before they come to the show, maybe they already have a pretty good idea of who they want to come see. So I think technology has definitely played a big role in how people approach these shows. It's changed how we do a lot of stuff, right? I know when I shopped for a vehicle, I did 90% of my shopping and research online before I ever stepped foot inside a car dealership, right?
Right.
So I think
And that's a good point. Is the customer today? I think regardless of what your business is armed with a heck of a lot more information than they were in 94 or 89 or whenever I started shooting weddings. But so that was only the only referral source was like, oh, my friend used this studio, I'll go check them out. There wasn't a website, there wasn't anything for them to go look. And now if a friend uses your studio, of course they can immediately go to your website, they can look at what you have there. But I mean, I agree with Brian. I like that idea, some sort of technology based, how can you woo or wow them? And even if you don't want to go to that extent, I think the people that you're having the good conversations with in your booth, if maybe you had even like a quick little form that just said name, email address, wedding date, and you asked their permission, like, hey, I really like you guys. Would you like to, again, spend more time outside of the show talking about it? Would it be okay? Would you be willing to give me your email address and a phone number? And we'll follow up with you over the weekend. We can set up a time for you to come in. And if they're interested, they're going to go ahead and do that. And like you both mentioned, you might only get 40 names at the end of the show, but those are 40 great leads that have allowed you and said, yes, you can call me. And they wrote their information down themselves. And so you can follow up with those 40 as opposed to going through that list of 400 and, getting maybe a smaller percentage or no, at least recognition or, they don't remember even who you were because there were so many people there.
Yeah, Brian, you wanted to talk about the floppy disk, so I want to touch on that. So the floppy disk, I know where you're going with it, but maybe people listening aren't sure where you're going with that. So what's the I guess the motivation behind the floppy disk?
Right. So a big part of my brand and sort of my belief system as a photographer is that prints are incredibly important. I actually believe photography is only enjoyed once it's printed, and that's something that I really make a point of establishing that expectation or establishing that, I guess, philosophy very early on with my clients, because I want them to have a beautiful album. I want them to have prints. I want them to have something physical. So in doing this at the bridal show, which is the first time I'll ever talk with them, it's a great time to start with that direction. And I'll kind of have those that believe in that, they'll lean in with me, and those that are like, just want digitals, they'll kind of lean out, and I'm fine with that. So what I do is I have a floppy disk. I actually have a whole stack of floppy disks, and it's actually quite hilarious because you can't even buy floppy disks locally. I had to buy them on Amazon in bulk.
Yeah, I was gonna say, where do you get those?
I had to buy them like 500 of them or something like that. So I've got like piles of them. So if anyone needs any floppy disks, let me know. They're a whopping 1.4 megabytes.
Ooh, so you could back up like a whole wedding on all.
Right, you could put like one web-sized file on that. It'd be wonderful. Unless you're using JPEG Mini, which is my pick of the week for last.
Yeah, there you go.
Anyway, so what I do is I actually I printed a whole bunch of labels, and on the front of the floppy disk it says wedding pictures, and on the back there's like a little another little label that says, and I'll just read it out here. It says, in 10 years, would you rather sit with your children and tell them stories from your wedding day with an album, or hope that you can find a computer to read your disc and click through the pictures on a screen? Yes, we provide digital proofs, but we think you'll love your album more. So I have that on the back of the floppy disk, and what I do, again, as an icebreaker, is I actually have a table with all my albums on it, and then I have this giant pile of floppy disks beside it. And as a bride and groom, approach the booth, and they're kind of making eye contact, and I'm seeing that they're interested in engaging in a conversation, I'll say, hey, a quick little banter, and then I'll grab a floppy disk and say, would love to give you guys my portfolio that you can go home and enjoy my photography at home after the show, so you can remember me. And I'll hand on the floppy disk. And at that time, I still haven't cracked a smile about it yet, so they're not. Yeah. They're kind of like,
they think you're serious.
Yeah, they think I'm serious, right? And usually it's like, the groom is something like, oh, I have a computer that like my grandpa, he'll make some smart aleck remark, and then I'll say something like, you probably don't have a computer that will read that disc, do you? And then they'll say like, no, and I'll say, well, that's exactly what your or what your USB key will be in 10 years from now. That's exactly what your DVD drive will be in 5 years from now. And then I use that as a way to get into the conversation about how printing photographs is so important, and how all my brides and grooms enjoy their images through a beautiful wedding album. And that's when I start showing them a wedding album.
Nice.
So it's a great icebreaker. It's a great way to kind of have a little comedic kind of thing, because a lot of the times it's very serious. You've got the other vendors that are there in suits and ties and whatever, and being very formal about things, and that's just not my style. I'm very casual and very relaxed. It's also my photography style, so it's a great way to kind of tie everything in one nice little package in a way that is very targeted towards the kind of bride I want to be working with.
Yeah, and probably makes you memorable too, right? Like they'll probably remember that interaction more so than.
Well, and the thing that's best about it is at the end of the show, when we have said that they go home and dump everything off, if they're with other people, if they're with their parents, if they're with their fiance now all of a sudden, and they dump everything onto a table and there's a floppy disk there, it's a quick memory of the conversation, B, it's something that they can remark upon, they can talk about it, and it definitely stands out from a sea of business cards and brochures.
Yeah, awesome. That's a good suggestion. I like that.
There's going to be a flood of floppy disks at wedding shows.
Yeah. Amazon.
I should open up like a branding company that brands floppy disks or something like that.
Yeah.
There went that original idea, Brian.
Yeah. Amazon's
but that's what we're here for. Give, give, give.
That's right. Amazon's gonna be like, why are sales of floppy disks going up? I don't understand what's going on. Like the resurgence in film. Did you guys see the announcement from Kodak yesterday?
No.
They are bringing back the Super 8.
Yeah, I saw that. But it didn't look like a Super 8 camera.
It'll take film, but somehow they're going to do the digital conversion and all this kind of stuff. So
this was alongside Nikon's announcement of their 360-degree 4K camera. It's like talk about two complete polar opposites.
Yeah, some pretty exciting stuff. So anyways, but that's a whole other rabbit hole for another show. That's for TWiP. We'll listen to the main TWiP show. They'll be talking about the stuff. So. Awesome. So I just wanted to wrap it up. I had a couple questions for you guys in terms of like staffing your booth and who would be at your booth. So obviously, for most of us, for most photographers, we're kind of solopreneurs, right? We are the face of the business. What are your guys' thoughts? Have you seen booths where they've had brought in other people to kind of help them with the booth, or would you recommend against that? What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I'd probably get a hot guy.
A hot guy.
You'd think because I'm a guy, I'd have a hot girl, and of course that would be my preference. But I think I'd have a hot guy there and a nice tux or suit, because the brides are gonna like, oh, who's that guy?
So well, Robert, for those that are watching this video right now, they might suggest that you should be that
guy. another month or two on the New Year's diet, and maybe we're doing all right.
But would they be the face of your company though? Like if you brought in somebody that wasn't necessarily normally associated with your company, would that be any benefit, or would that possibly be more harmful in terms of like if they happen to be like, say you were engaged in a conversation with a potential bride and groom and somebody else came along and looked at the booth dude, is that possibly a missed opportunity? Or
I mean, I think if you're going to go to the extent to do that, then of course you need to educate that person. I mean, we as photographers see this all the time at trade shows that we go to. I mean, I've even seen it to the extent, like you guys have been to WPPI, where there's actually painted nude people walking around the trade show, and it's a shtick, it's a gimmick, it's an attention getter. Obviously, that's out of place, I think, for a wedding show. But to maybe have a good-looking guy or girl.
Could be interesting though if you painted a tuxedo on.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Right. But you would, I think, have to educate that person a little bit. So if you were engaged in a conversation, yes, maybe they're directing you to there, or they're inviting people over to come look at your booths or pick up a floppy disk, whatever it is, I think that could be good. But ultimately, it's probably best, to have, two people there that care about the business and know the business and are passionate about the business. But it is definitely an option if it's, just something you wanted to do.
Yeah. Brian, what have you? Do you normally staff the booth, you and your wife, or who's normally at the booth representing?
Yeah, it's normally me and my wife, and that's because we're the ones that will be at the wedding.
Right.
And again, it's kind of like it is a branding thing. It is like the name of my company is Brian Capricci Photography, so for Brian Capricci not to be there would kind of be silly, I think.
Right.
That being said, I have had 1 year when I had an office manager, I had her there as well, so there's 3 of us at the booth.
Yeah.
Which I think is fine, and I guess it also depends on how big you want it to be. I think you can I've seen it where you have too many people behind the booth or at the booth type of thing, and it gets too overwhelming. I don't think you need more than 2 people, maybe 3 if it's a really big show.
Yeah.
Because again, it's about quality and not quantity, right? So I think that being said, even if you are to have one other person or 2 other people, you've got to have good conversations with them and kind of go through a training with them to say, here are the kinds of conversations that we'd want to have. Here are the answers that you should be giving. Here are the benefits and the unique value proposition that we offer as a studio. If they don't already know those things, you can't just basically find someone that's good at talking with people and say, come on and man my booth.
Yeah.
They have to have an understanding of the industry. They're going to have questions asked of them. So you've got to train them to know what to say properly. If it's not you, right?
I've talked to people like that at trade shows that you can clearly tell they were basically just hired the day before, given a really basic script, and if you asked them anything outside of that really basic script, they were like deer in the headlights.
Right. Well, and I guess the other thing is, if we put this in a way that I think probably most photographers, again, that have been to at least one of the trade shows, the industry trade shows that we go to, can relate to. If you know Shoot.edit and you know Jared Bowman, who's the owner of Shoot.edit, if you were to go to the Shoot.edit booth and see Jared beside one of their customer service staff, who would you be more inclined to want to speak with? Probably Jared, because he's like the, not celebrity, but he's the face of the brand.
Yep.
The same could be said for Fundy Software, right? If you were to go to the booth and see Andrew there, Fundy, or one of their service staff, you'd probably want to go and speak with them. So even if you can't speak with them, at least knowing that they're there and knowing that they're involved and not just kind of pawning it out to their staff makes you feel good about the company. And I know that these are kind of bigger brands that we're talking about, but I think that we can bring it down to a smaller level for us. If it's Brian Capricci Photography and yet there's 2 females there, well, where's Brian? Like, you know what I mean? So I think that we've got to have some of our personality injected there, if at least we're just there as one of the people.
Yeah. Excellent stuff. Any parting thoughts before we're kind of getting close to the end here of the show? So I thought we'd probably wrap it up there. But any parting thoughts or words of advice, Robert? Bridal shows. Would you do them today or not? If you were just starting out, if you're just kind of relaunching.
I think if I was starting out, yes, but I just don't think, for me, it's not my demographic. So you have to just sort of evaluate that. Like I said, I did the one year I started my own business in '94. I probably booked 8 or so weddings from that. And so it was worth my time. It probably cost me $1,000 to do that, but it came back. I mean, I think the bummer is you spend $1,000, $2,000 to do a show and book one wedding. Well, okay, it pays for it maybe, but you want to obviously book more than that. You want it to be worthwhile. It's kind of like, a magazine ad. I mean, at least you could probably track it more, but you hope to book something, you spend a lot of money to do it. So I think we've just given you, I don't know if I have any more wisdom to impart, but I think we've given you some good things to think about. Go out there and be unique, be yourself. Be approachable. Don't be salesy. People don't want to be sold, but they do want to be told what to do in a lot of cases. So there's that fine line of figuring out that both. Like, I think I do it well just because that is my personality. Then there's others that think, oh, well, I have to sell them. Listen more. It's always in anything. Listen more instead of talk more. Ask them, engaging questions. How long, I'm sure everyone asks that, but how long you been engaged? How did he propose? Things like that to get them talking about their wedding. What are your colors? What are, ask them questions. Let them talk. I would say get it to the point where you can't ask that question like, may I contact you afterwards? Can I get a little information? I really like you guys, and this isn't the best, because that also sort of exudes confidence. You're sort of telling them like, no, I don't really want to talk to you right now. I've gotten to know you. I know that I like you, but I'd rather spend quality time with you.
Right.
So I think that could be that's my imparting wisdom.
Very good. Brian, how about you? Any parting thoughts on the topic of bridal shows?
Yeah, I would just close with the idea, we talked, or I talked a little bit about marketing beforehand, and then we talked a lot about the show itself. If I can just share a couple quick thoughts on marketing after the show, because
Oh,
I think
yes,
that's
yeah.
something that a lot of photographers will miss out on. You kind of just finish the show and you're exhausted, you're tired, and you kind of now just wait for the phone to ring.
Right. Yeah.
If most shows, I don't think there's many shows that won't either sell or share the email list of brides and grooms that go through the show. That's a huge asset to you, not necessarily in the sense that you take that email address and spam them like everybody else will, but try to get creative with how you use that. One thing that I have seen work really well is to take that email list and put it into a retargeting campaign through Facebook advertising. So you can then serve Facebook ads to all the brides and grooms that are on that list. And again, maybe it's one of those things where it's an awareness thing, hit it hard for the week to 2 weeks after the show, and those brides and grooms might kind of constantly see your name come up and be like, oh yeah, I did see them at the show. I really enjoyed the conversation.
That guy with the floppy disks.
Yeah, the guy with the floppy disks, right? And bonus, if we're not bonus, what you should be doing is try to tie something visually in that ad with what you had at the show. So if you had like a really big image at the show, put that image in the ad. Or if you had a floppy disk like what I do and that's your memorable thing, put that in the ad. So it's a way for them to create the connection with who is this guy that I keep seeing on my Facebook feed.
Yeah.
So you can do things like that. You can do a drip campaign to it. You can just send out emails to them all. But just be strategic about what you're doing with those emails afterwards, because you can do a lot with them.
Nice. Excellent. Well, that's some good advice and some good suggestions. Again, if you're thinking of participating in a bridal show, or maybe you've been doing bridal shows for a while and you're looking to kind of change things up a little bit, hopefully we provided you with some food for thought, some things to think about anyway. So, awesome. Well, we kind of ran a little bit long today, so I'm gonna skip the listener question. I know Robert was dying to answer this one, but we'll put it off for the next show. We'll answer it on the next show. And I want to quickly just jump on to our picks of the week segment. And each episode we will share a photography-related item that we think would benefit wedding photographers, and our picks can be anything as long as they're somehow related to photography or the business thereof of photography. So, who wants to go first with their pick? I know, Brian, you had something.
Yeah, let's do it. So this is actually related to wedding shows and kind of everything I talked about, or we talked about. The giveaway that I gave, in addition to the floppy disk that we talked about, now this is something, the floppy disk goes to everyone that I have a conversation with. This book that I give out will only go to those that I feel are more highly qualified clients, because it's actually cost me a fair bit of money. Not a fair bit, but it cost me money. But it's something that is a great way to, again, stand out, but also really represents me and my brand. And it is a book, and it's like, how many pages is it? Maybe it's 130 pages. It's like a paperback book that you'd like buy at a bookstore.
Yep.
Beautiful satin cover. The pages are like, it's all, and basically what I have in it is like full page images. I basically got a whole bunch of weddings in there just to show basically my portfolio. It's like my website in a book form. And I tell brides this, again, it's a reinforcement, and I say, if you don't want to have to be on a computer to enjoy my photography, because I do believe so strongly that photography is best enjoyed in print, here's a printed portfolio of a book that you can remember me by, you can share with family and friends, and you can just use as a reference, even if you just want inspiration. And the place that I get this book printed is a company called CreateSpace. And CreateSpace is a part of Amazon. They're owned by Amazon. It's basically their printing and publishing company, their subsidiary.
Okay.
And basically what you do is it's the same process that you do if you wanted to kind of self-publish a book. You use CreateSpace. And instead of me selling this on Amazon or making it available for purchase, I just make it and I kind of keep it hidden, and I just order copies myself.
Oh, okay.
So
what's the one looking at for that book? So it's about 130 pages?
Yeah, the book is 6 inches by 9 inches, or roughly around there. 130 pages. It's a soft cover. When I order about 100 of them, it costs me about $3.50 to $4, depending on a couple different factors. Okay. So it's not horrible. Obviously, if you're looking at buying, a couple hundred of them, it could get up to 1,000 pretty quickly.
Yep.
But I think it's a really nice takeaway for those clients, or those potential clients that you're talking with, that are more well qualified, and is a way that you can really, you know, emphasize the brand that you want to be giving to them. So.
Oh, nice. Now, do you save those just for bridal shows, or do you give those out?
No, I give them to every bride and groom that I have a meet and greet with. It's in the whole
Yep.
package that I give them when I have a meet and greet. If someone inquires that I can't physically meet with, I'll mail them a copy of it. So it's something that I use more than just at bridal shows.
Yeah.
But I usually order them in bulk for the bridal show, and then I order a few extra so that I can have them for other things.
Nice. And that's something you update like every year, kind of
Yep,
thing,
every
with
year
fresh
I update.
images and.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. That's very cool.
So createspace.com. I guess that's technically the pick of the week.
Nice. Awesome. I like it.
Yeah.
Mr. Evans, what have you got for us this week? I think it's a follow-up, I think.
Yeah, I'm going to follow up because I think I was just checking it out last time, but we've done shows on Zero Inbox, and I found a service or a product called SaneBox, and it works with your Gmail or any of your type of mails, and basically you just sort of train your email, but it was really, really helped, keep my email down. If I get a junk mail, they have a thing called Sane Black Hole, and you just drag it into, and basically if you use Gmail, it just adds these things into your Gmail, like as you would add a folder, and I just drag it in there, and for all the junk mail, even though I try to unsubscribe to a lot of it, it unsubscribes, it never comes back. There's a thing Sane Later where it pulls stuff it knows that it's not that important to you, and then the other stuff shows up in your inbox, but if something goes into Sane Later and you want it, you just drag it back into your inbox. I've really been enjoying it, and it seems to really do the trick. So for me, I'm loving it. It takes that hassle of when I would wake up in the morning and have 50 emails in my inbox and it was all crap and I only wanted 3 or 4 of them. I mean, that's completely gone away, so helps me really focus on the important stuff.
Awesome. And the burning question everybody wants to know now is, have you reached and achieved the holy land known as Inbox Zero? Or are you closer?
Well, I'm closer. I mean, because technically I didn't erase everything that was already in my inbox.
Yep.
But if I were to do that with this product, yes, I think I could achieve that because it's just training it to where everything needs to go. It also has kind of like the boomerang type feature where if you don't want to deal with something now, you can put it in there and tell it when to come back into your inbox, which is really great. Especially a lot of times, we're home with our families, maybe on the weekends, and you get something because everyone's off and they're emailing you. I'm like, I don't want to deal this with until Monday, or I don't need to deal with this, deadline for 2 more weeks or things like that.
Nice. Excellent. That's a good follow-up pick. So that's called SaneBox. And again, we'll link to that in the show notes for this episode. And my pick this week is it's a software product that I've been using for quite a number of years, and we probably all run into this where we're dealing with so many different websites and logins and passwords and things like that, just keeping track of and remembering all that stuff, all the different logins that we have for all the different services and things. So I use a solution called LastPass, which is it's a password keeper basically, so it can put in all your passwords and all your login credentials for all the different sites you visit. And they just released version 4, so it's got a new kind of visual look to it, which I quite like. And they added a really cool feature, which is the ability to appoint somebody as an emergency sort of fallback person. So I don't know, we had to deal with this a couple of years ago when we lost a family member, and it was really hard to figure out how do we get into some of their stuff, because a lot of their stuff was behind, how do we change their Facebook stuff or these kinds of things. So you can appoint somebody with it now as kind of an emergency person. So if something ever happened to you, they can request all your credentials for all your different services, and then after a certain time period, if you haven't replied or denied the request, they assume that you're incapable of doing that, so then they would then receive all of your login credentials for your websites and stuff. So it's kind of an interesting thought that, in this digital world that we live in now, with stuff that's all behind passwords and emails and things like that, if something did ever happen to somebody, I even thought just about myself, if something happened to me tomorrow, my wife doesn't necessarily know how to get into all the different things that we do for the business, right, for the website and the blog and just all these kinds of things. So just having that peace of mind that somebody could still get at those things, if something were to happen to me, then it would be, kind of good peace of mind. So that's a new feature they just added to LastPass.
Cool.
Excellent. As always, again, we'll put links to everything we talked about in the show in the blog post. So just head on over to thisweekinphoto.com and go to the weddings section, and you'll see the blog post for this episode. And I guess that brings us to the end of another episode of TWiP Weddings. Thanks again to our sponsors for their support. And I want to remind you, send in your questions for the show and send us some suggestions for topics you'd like to hear us talk about on future episodes. So, before we close off, what's everybody up to over the next little while, and where can our audience go to keep up with what you're doing, Mr. Evans?
Well, obviously this will be past, but I'm headed down to PPA for a few days. I have an upcoming wedding in New York, upcoming wedding in Cancun in February. So, still working a little bit, talking a little bit. But if you want to find me, and you care, RobertEvans.com is, of course, my website. Instagram and Twitter are at Robert Evans, and Facebook is Robert Evans Studios. And for my Sony fans out there, I want everyone to check out the Alpha Universe site. Sony, shortly before the beginning of the year, I think it was October, so launched Alpha Universe, which is everything Sony, a lot of great articles. So go check it out.
Awesome. Very good. Mr. Caparici, what have you got going on in the next little while?
Oh, next little while. Well, I guess we have a baby coming in March, so that'll be busy. When
congratulations! A new little Caparici running around.
That's right, number 2. So
yeah,
I guess depending on when this goes live, I don't know if I'll be sleep deprived at that point or not. But yeah,
well, congratulations!
So thank you very much. So yeah, we've got that going on. But other than that, yeah, we've got WPPI. Going to Shutterfest in a couple months. We've got Canada Photo Convention in Vancouver that we're going to.
Excellent.
So we've got that going on. Other than that, we're keeping busy over here with Sprout, kind of just continually working on new features and writing more content over at sproutingphotographer.com. So if anyone is interested in checking any of that out, you can find us at sproutingphotographer.com. Also, we have a New Year promo happening for Sprout Studios. If anyone's interested in signing up and starting their new year off on the right foot, you can use the code FRESHSTARTMONTHLY to save 20% on your first 3 months for Sprout Studio.
Very good. Fresh Start Monthly. All right, make sure I'll
you can sign up for that at getsproutstudio.com.
Awesome. Good stuff. Very good. Well, I too will be going to WPPI again this year. I'll be returning, and I'm also going to be out in Vancouver for Canada Photo Convention too. So,
awesome.
Not speaking, just going out for my first time as an attendee. So, looking forward to that. So that'll be good. So, and if you're looking for me and our stuff, you can find us over at momentsanddigital.com. That's our website. It should be all up and running now, 100%. We had some problems over the holidays with our host, so we changed hosts, and magically everything's working fine now. So clearly the issue was the host. So, and if you want to keep up kind of with our stuff, we can link to our blog, and you'll see what we're up to there. If you want to follow me, again, like Robert, if you care, you can follow me. I'm at Bruce Clark on most of the social networks, and that's Clark with an E at the end. And that's it. That brings us to the end of another episode. Be sure to visit our website at thisweekinphoto.com. And thanks again for listening to TWiP Weddings, raising the bar one wedding at a time.